Hey everyone, Richard from Digital Foundry here, and well, I've just got back from the Nintendo Switch presentation in London, and joining me to discuss it is John Linneman. Now, he's actually in Frankfurt and he went to the German presentation. So John, what do you make of it?
Well, it was, at least in the German side, it was a well-organized event. Everything went off without a hitch, and I got to play a whole lot of Nintendo Switch today.
And?
Well, I am impressed with the hardware itself in terms of the feel and the industrial design. It feels like a huge step up from where Nintendo's been in the past. But it ultimately kind of like impressions of playing the system. It kind of feels like the Wii U, but like you can take it on the road with you.
I think the thing from my perspective is that when you go in and look at the system as a home system, connected to an HD TV, I mean, the games are very much of the Wii U generation. And if it wasn't a tremendous handheld that you could basically undock, take anywhere, and play the same games with approximately the same visual quality, I think it would be a complete disaster for Nintendo, because there's very little evolution in terms of what the actual games are offering. And that's a bit of a problem from my perspective, because, you know, familiarity breeds contempt. But at the same time, you undock and you're playing Wii U quality software. And, you know, I guess it is better than Wii U, and we'll go into that shortly. But the games are of the same generation. I mean, I think the bottom line is being able to use it as a portable is absolutely awesome, but the actual docked experience, not so impressive in my view.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you there. I was surprised to see just how low resolution a lot of the games were. Now, obviously there were some that went for 1080p, but I'd say the majority of them were quite a bit lower than that, including some surprising ones, even like ports of games like Disgaea 5 or Bomberman and titles like that that are very simplistic visually. They were not at 1080p, and it looked kind of awful. It was very low resolution, and the frame rate was, well, I mean, I guess it was just 30 frames per second, which, this is Bomberman we're talking about here.
There was a lot of games there which were very disappointing. I don't think there's any way around it. For example, Ultra Street Fighter 2.
Yeah, the Ultra Street Fighter 2.
I can't believe what they're doing. It's a port of an Xbox 360 live arcade game, and they want $40 for it.
Whoa, say that again. Did you just say $40?
That's apparently what the recommended price is for the game, which, you know, we were paying virtually nothing for it on Xbox 360, God knows how many years ago, and it's the same game. A couple of new extra characters and I believe a story mode.
That's disappointing.
Yeah, and well, what can I say? 1-2 Switch, what do you make of that?
We're kind of starting with the negatives, I guess, here, but 1-2 Switch is interesting, and it seems like the type of thing that would be pre-installed on a Switch unit.
Yeah.
But it's very, very, very simple mini games. I mean, we're talking like 2 minutes or less per round, and you don't even need to use the TV or the screen at all. So I guess, I mean, it's an interesting concept, and not unlike something like Johann Sebastian Joust.
I just can't believe it. I just can't believe that they want to charge $40 for that. I mean, these are games, I mean, they're very polished for what they are, but these games are kind of, well, how can you say it? They're disposable entertainment, you know.
Those absolutely are, and this comes from somebody that actually spent, you know, because I couldn't find the full unit at the Wii U launch, I bought Nintendo Land separately, and I was actually happy with that. I thought it was an awesome experience or collection of mini games, but this is just nothing. I mean, it's a very strange thing.
The thing about Nintendo Land is that the Nintendo Wii U had a concept, and the software there was designed to maximize the concept. That isn't really what you can say for 1-2 Switch. It's just kind of like almost like a collection of very basic games that you would download for free from the App Store. So, you know, there's a lot of negatives here and a lot of kind of WTF moments where I thought, what on earth are Nintendo playing at here? And the price points, whether it's for the machine or some of the software, is stratospheric for what you're actually getting. I think we've got to get that out of the way first, because I'm really not sure about the value proposition here, and my concern is that it's just going to tank the machine from day one.
Yeah, I'm actually very worried about that. It's because I do feel like that could really hurt its chances in the market, because I mean the Wii U was also kind of overpriced when it launched and people ignored it, and if you don't get that start out of the gate, it's not good for the future. And I feel like Nintendo had a ton of momentum coming into today, where like if they had just announced a really good price point and just had enough to really spark people's interest, that it would have been an absolute madhouse on, you know, online shopping and whatnot. I mean, I guess they're still going to sell out at launch, there's no doubt, but I feel like there's definitely some trepidation there now.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, but let's look at the positives. Breath of the Wild, Zelda, that was looking, well, it's still very much a Wii U style game, but we got to see a number of things there. First of all, the docked experience, pretty much a locked 30 FPS. I think you found some areas where it was dipping, but it's nowhere near as bad as what we saw at E3.
I did play it on the Wii U as well previously, which is 720p, and I guess the Switch version is 900p instead, so it is sharper. But the big takeaway is that the frame rate is so much smoother than it was on Wii U. I mean, granted, that was an old Wii U build, no doubt, but outside of a few hitches here and there and some slowdown when the depth of field would come on, and you know, it was generally a locked 30 frames per second, so it really was pretty smooth. Yeah,
and let's talk about the Switch mechanic here, because the way it works, you undock it and then you press the two shoulder buttons, L and R, and then the A button, and then it kind of switches into the portable mode. Have I got that right?
Oh, yeah, that's how it worked there. And so I was playing with the Pro controller, as I guess you were on the TV.
Yeah.
So I guess when you undock it, the system goes into searching for controller mode, and whichever buttons you press, that's what becomes active. Because when I first undocked it, I bumped the Pro controller and I guess the triggers, because I pushed it up against the dock, and that controller picked up first. And then the guy was like, oh wait, we need to switch to the JoyCons that are on the system itself. So then I had to go through that again. And so it seems like it automatically looks for a new controller input device when you undock or redock.
So that was really interesting. And I think the other thing, of course, was the 720p 30 performance on handheld mode, which was pretty much, well, when I had a quick go of it, it was flawless.
So I played about 40 minutes of Zelda today, and 30 of that was in docked mode, but then I spent a solid 10 minutes in portable mode, and it did actually appear to be running just as well as the docked mode. And on that screen, it looked really good. It was very, very sharp. I mean, 720p screens in the mobile phone world are nothing these days, but that is a massive leap from where Nintendo has been previously. I mean, the 3DS is like 400 by 240. So to go up to a full 720p, even the Wii U was just like 853 by 480 or something along those lines.
There's sort of two different ways you can look at the Switch. I mean, as a home console, I'm kind of came out of the event disappointed by what I was seeing on the HD TV. I kind of wanted more. I wanted more than a Wii U. But then when you play as a handheld, I mean, if this was like a next generation Game Boy with the ability to dock to a screen, you know, if the spin was from that perspective, if it was a handheld first and a home console second, I think the perception of the machine would be entirely different, because as a handheld, it's pretty stunning, I think.
Yeah, I think that's it's more of a marketing issue they need to sort out in terms of how they position it. They really need to find a way to really say, this is your handheld experience that you can also play at home, and this is the new Nintendo central pillar where all of our development teams will go. So this is where you're going to get all your Nintendo games. I mean, I think it's a more enticing proposition when you think about it that way, rather than, oh, it's your home console, but you can also take it on the go, because you're right, the home console experience was underwhelming.
I just think that the concept of the machine as a handheld makes a lot more sense, especially when you look at Nintendo's pedigree. Previously, their handheld machines have been sort of underpowered, but great game design has kind of saved the day there. And suddenly we've got this, well, I won't say it's state-of-the-art technology, but what they've achieved there in bringing essentially the last-gen home console experience enhanced into a handheld, it's pretty amazing.
I agree, and I think that something to consider there is the Nintendo polish difference. So we do have mobile devices that could be more powerful than this with higher resolution screens, but if you go and play many iOS or Android games, there's always this sense that they just lack something. They feel a little bit unpolished or a little bit jittery here and there. They just don't feel that solid. But except for 3 games at the show, every single title there was running at a locked 60 frames per second. And, you know, it may not be cutting edge visually, but the experience was very, very smooth. And being able to see that both on a portable and on a home console, I mean, that's nice. I think that helps a lot.
Mm-hmm. So we've got, obviously Zelda was not running at 60 frames per second.
Zelda was 30 frames per second, obviously. The other 2 were Bomberman. Bomberman R was 30 frames per second. And lastly, it was Skylanders. That was also 30 frames per second.
Yeah, that looks very blurry when I saw it.
Yeah, that was extremely blurry looking. That was not a great looking game there.
Native resolution count on that is going to be interesting, I think. And speaking of which, here's a bit of a concern that I've got. Now, we've been looking at Super Mario Odyssey footage.
Yeah.
And we've played Splatoon 2, and both of them are 720p. And those were running on the, what I presume, well, definitely for Splatoon on the HD TV, and Super Mario Galaxy, I assume that is the docked experience. And so my sort of concern there is, where do you go for the handheld one?
I'm wondering about that too, because I mean, Super Mario Odyssey, as they showed it, running on a handheld would look unbelievably good. But will they actually be able to get to a full 720p 60 if that's what the docked experience is? That's what I'm wondering too, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Splatoon, I mean, they were saying, I think something we should stress, Splatoon and obviously Super Mario Odyssey are not complete software.
That's true, exactly. And I think I also kind of want to stress, we're kind of like exploring sort of the, I don't want to say it's nitpicking, but you know, we're kind of exploring the limitations of this, but I do want to say that my overall experience was pretty good here. I mean, yeah, the home console experience was underwhelming, but I still think that there's a solid machine in here, especially from the handheld perspective. See, in a game like Mario Kart 8, for instance, we determined that was actually 1080p now versus 720p on the Wii.
Yeah, that's interesting, because obviously it's a huge resolution bump over the Wii U version, although we never quite understood, you know, how much headroom there is remaining on there. But the fact that you are moving from 720p 60 to 1080p 60 is a big deal. Obviously on Zelda, going from 720p with extremely variable performance on Wii U, hopefully that's better in the final code, but we just don't know, to 900p. There is obviously additional GPU power there compared to the Wii U, possibly even in its handheld form.
Exactly.
So yeah, there is a lot of, I would say, untapped potential that Nintendo could conceivably look at, and we're kind of possibly seeing some of that with Super Mario. And also, what do you think of ARMS? Because that title, again, you know, it very much seems of the Wii U generation, but it did seem to be very slick, and again, 60 frames per second.
So it did look very nice, but the actual control method felt significantly better than I would have anticipated. I kind of liken it to, it's sort of a take on Sega's classic Virtual On series, where you hold the controllers as if you're holding dual sticks, and you know, you move them back and forth, and in order to, like, I guess if you want to go right, you tilt both to the right. If you want to go left, you do it like that. And, you know, you've got your dash buttons and your jump button, and you have left, right, and center attacks and special attacks, and it felt really responsive. And those little controllers, the JoyCons, when you hold them that way, it actually feels surprisingly natural, I thought.
I really enjoyed that game. I loved the visual design, the art direction. It actually seemed to have anti-aliasing, which a lot of the games didn't. I was shocked. No AA on Splatoon, nothing on Mario Kart. And it's still, again, you know, so a lot of the visual artifacts that we had from Wii U, for example, poor texture filtering, seem to have persisted into Switch. It's a bit of a disappointment there, but at the same time, you know, the fact that they're doing the last generation level of quality on a handheld, that's really what's the machine's saving grace for me.
If you consider we're coming from the Wii U, then you still get a very slight bump in graphical capabilities, but if you're coming from a 3DS, it's a massive leap from where they were before, and probably one of the largest leaps that Nintendo's ever made in the handheld space, to be honest.
And I'm actually quite impressed with what Tegra X1 is handing in here. Obviously, there are elements of customization in there which we're not fully privy to, and then there are the clock speeds which we are privy to, which aren't impressive, but this is a classic example of what happens when you have direct to the metal access to the GPU and the hardware generally. And I'm really impressed there. I mean, I think what we're seeing there, it's kind of almost like a spiritual successor in many ways to what we're seeing on PlayStation Vita, where we saw a ridiculously underpowered SoC produce stuff like Killzone Mercenary and Wipeout 2048.
Yeah, exactly. And I think I actually have made the Vita comparison already, and some people take that as a negative, but you have to remember the Vita itself is an excellent piece of hardware. It was really well made, and the problem was more that it just wasn't supported that well by Sony. And, you know, so I don't think there's anything wrong with the Vita. I mean, it didn't exactly excel in the market either, which of course led to that, but the hardware itself was sound, and this feels like the next step. This is like what you might expect from a second Vita or another PSP.
I think the difference is very simple. You know, Sony never committed the A teams to producing Vita software.
Actually, that's a really good point. You're right, exactly. This has the full weight of Nintendo behind it.
The top tier developers, the Mario, the Zelda team, they're working entirely on Switch going forward. And that is the key difference, I think, between PlayStation Vita and the Switch. There is very much a level of, there is a comparison in terms of really pushing a mobile chipset, but at the same time, you know, that is the difference there, the commitment in terms of development resource.
And I think the important thing here is that no longer will Nintendo have to focus on two platforms. With the Wii U 3DS situation and prior generations, they always broke up their teams into groups in order to tackle both platforms, and rarely did the games cross over. But now everything that was previously a handheld exclusive, we can presume, will show up on the Switch, as well as their big console games. So I mean, this might be the first time we have a legitimate Pokemon game, for instance, actually available to play on a home console, which that's pretty cool.
Okay, John, let's move on and let's talk about the actual physical properties of the machine itself. From my perspective, first impressions, beautiful 720p IPS screen. I really liked the build quality of the machine, as you said earlier, massive improvement over the Wii U's gamepad and older Nintendo handhelds. I was quite surprised how thin it is and also how wide it was with the JoyCons attached.
Yeah, it does feel, it was shockingly wide to hold. I mean, it's still comfortable enough, but yeah, it feels pretty large in your hands, and I think a bit larger than the Wii U gamepad, and that might just be an impression due to the thinness of it, but it's definitely strange to hold, but not uncomfortable.
A couple of things that were slightly odd from my perspective was the offset analog nubs, having one at the top on the one side and one on the bottom on the other.
I mean, they basically switched back to the, I guess you could say the Xbox layout there.
Yeah.
Because on Wii U, they used to have the sticks both at the top, and of course, PlayStation has them both in the center, and then Xbox has always had the offset sticks. And I think that's actually a pretty good choice there for this system. So I used the controller in all the configurations and the Pro controller. Now the Joy-Cons themselves, when you use them by themselves, they are actually very tiny, but they were more comfortable than I imagined because, one, the analog stick placement. In the center it looks strange, but you have to think that when you're holding something that small, your thumb is just going to naturally kind of sit there in the middle. If it had been on the outside, I feel like you'd actually be straining your thumb a little bit more, so it would be even less comfortable. And also, I'm not sure what they had at the UK event, but every time we had the separate Joy-Cons, they slid like a little sliver. It's like a thin black piece of plastic with 2 extra buttons on it, another set of LED lights, and a strap. And it made the Joy-Con itself thicker to hold, and of course it had the strap. Whereas it wasn't just the raw thing that you pulled off the system itself. They actually attached something else to it. And with that, it felt pretty good. Now, when you put it inside the dog controller or whatever, the floppy-eared dog looking thing, whatever it's called, That was also reasonably comfortable, but it did feel a little bit weird because it's very narrow. But of course, the lack of a D-pad is kind of, I mean, I understand why they did it, but it's a little bit disappointing in the sense that, you know, if you're playing a platforming game, you're going to want to use the D-pad, and it's basically you have two sets of face buttons, which is a little bit strange. But on the other hand, the Pro Controller, now that also has more of the Xbox configuration than the Wii U Pro Controller did. And the big thing for me was the D-pad was excellent on that thing. So we may have been disappointed by Street Fighter 2 being, you know, what it is, but I know how to play Street Fighter 2 all right, and I played a bunch of rounds of it, and the D-pad was just, I had zero problems pulling out every move. It just felt really, really good. But on the flip side, it did make me wonder how you would actually play that game with the Joy-Cons attached to the Switch itself, since you're stuck using an analog stick, I'd imagine, because you can't exactly do a quarter circle using face buttons, I'd imagine.
Did you play the 1-2 Switch game where you have to guess the amount of balls that are in a kind of wooden box? So the JoyCon Works, it basically is the wooden box. You sort of tilt it about in your hand and you get kind of feedback. You actually can feel the balls rolling about inside.
Oh, that's cool.
On the one hand, yeah, it kind of felt very impressive, but on the other hand, the whole point of the game is to use that feedback to guess how many balls are in there from 1 to 9. And the fact that I must have done it about 6 times and never got anything like the correct answer, either I'm extremely rubbish or maybe it just wasn't a great concept for showing the game at its best, showing the system at its best. But it certainly felt good, and you know, I was quite impressed that they're at least trying something new with that. Yeah, I think we should end this with our kind of favourite bits, and I think from my perspective, I think it was the undocking of Zelda. I was playing it on the HD TV. The undocking procedure was completely painless, very easy to do, and the quality of the experience, despite the fact that we're running at 40% GPU clocks, was still brilliant and still better than Wii U, or what we know of the Wii U version so far. So that was a highlight for me. And also Mario Kart as a handheld experience, absolutely brilliant, no doubt about it. So what about you?
It looked amazing, and the fact that I played it as well in 2-player split screen mode on the handheld itself, being able to see that running at 60 frames per second in 2-player split screen on the handheld screen using 2 Joy-Cons, that's pretty impressive, I have to say.
Okay, so thanks for that, John. Do like and subscribe to support Digital Foundry, and remember that our Patreon supporters can download pristine quality versions of our videos. And yeah, we're going to have some nice goodies there, I think, over the next few days, Switch related. Okay, but that's all we've got for now. Thanks for watching.